Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Board Candidate Forum. No doubt an exciting addition to your Friday evening. First, a big thanks to all the NAJA staff, Rebecca, Sterling, Sheena, for the help in pulling all of this together, and a big thanks to Victoria Lepeau for providing so much help during this election as well. Couple of housekeeping notes for the folks that are here. If you could just keep your mics muted during the conversation, it would be much appreciated. If you have questions for the candidates, you're welcome to drop them into the chats. Otherwise, for those of you who are watching this recording at home, hopefully your questions will be answered this evening. So one other note, please remember that in this election, we're not only bringing in new board members, we are also looking at changes to membership policy. So please do take a look at your ballots when it's time to vote, as there are other items up for vote for NAJA members. So with that, I guess I'd like to welcome the candidates, and I'll let y'all introduce yourselves directly. Savannah, how about I start with you?
Sure, thanks, Tristan. I'm Savannah Marr. I am based in Albuquerque. Right now I'm working as a reporter for Marketplace. I just started at the beginning of this month, actually. And before that, I've got about 2.5 years in the industry under my belt. I started as a producer with Here and Now, the NPR show, and then spent some time reporting on the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, moved to a regional Indigenous affairs beat with the Mountain West News Bureau after that. Yeah, and I'm Mashpee Wampanoag.
Okay, thanks, Savannah. Francine?
Hey, Tristan, Savannah, it's nice to be here with you guys tonight, and to any audience members who will eventually watch the recording. I'm Francine Compton, and I've been on the board for a couple of years now, and I've been in the business for about 22 years now. I started pretty young, fresh out of high school. I actually had my broadcast training in high school, and it really timed out in my benefit that the world's first national Indigenous television network was launching right around the same time I was graduating. So I had this strike of luck that I was given this advice to study broadcasting, and got into APTN. I started out as a studio crew. I did directing, shooting, editing. I wrote stories. I worked as a video journalist, and then I moved to New York for a little bit, and I tried to get a directing job out there. Felt pretty ambitious as a young person, and I landed an interview at MSNBC. It wasn't really down my alley, but I felt that was a huge accomplishment, and my home network was calling me back, APTN. So I started there. I went back there on the editorial side, and when I went back on the editorial side, it was a new mission for me, and that mission was just to work my way back into a place where I could have a say at the decision-making level. And that was really important for me. So I was able to work my way up. I started as a researcher writer. I moved on to becoming a producer through having a mentorship done. And from that point, I went for another mentorship that came up a few years after that, which was for an executive producer. And I was mentored to become the executive producer for national news for Eastern Canada for APTN. And I was based in their political bureau, their parliamentary bureau in Canada's capital. And I managed probably about a dozen to 14 reporters on a daily basis who were filing for daily news, television, for online. Some were doing investigations, some were on-air hosts. And APTN sent me off for training, which is when I met you, Tristan. I met Tristan, the former president at the Poynter Institute, and that was another moment where it was a strike of luck. It felt like that we met, and that moment, I felt like I was the only Indigenous person in the room. I'm going to be honest, and Tristan, his back was to me. And I was, looking at my notebook, and I heard him introduce himself, and he said, Native American Journalists Association. And I just like lit up. And then I think the same thing probably happened to Tristan, where, I introduced myself being from APTN. So, we felt there were parallels in our causes, in our work. And I always looked up to NAJA. And so for me, it was wonderful to meet someone from the organization. It was even more wonderful to meet everybody else on the board and to be welcomed on to the board. And it's an honor to do the work that we do. I know this is a long introduction, but I've had a long career, and I felt that I should also introduce the way that I entered into this organization, and also be able to say how much respect I have for it.
Well, thank you for that, both of you. I guess I'll have sort of first question here then. Savannah, we'll start with you, and obviously similar question to you after this, Francine, but I guess why run now? What's driven you to want to be a part of NAJA as a board member this election?
I think mostly I've reached a point in my career where I feel like I can be helpful, whereas maybe the last couple of years I was still getting my legs under me. But yeah, I have a lot of ideas about how to get more students and just Native journalists that are just getting their start, how to make things easier for them, how to help get them into the jobs that they want to be in, and get more Native reporters working at various outlets. And I don't know, I guess having been just starting out in journalism the last couple of years, I feel like I know those challenges pretty well. So that's why now.
Okay. Francine, you've been on the board, but yeah, why stick with it?
I gotta say everything Savannah said, because that's really the heart of our mission. But I don't feel that my work is done, and I have a lot more years that I can put into working for this organization. But it is, it goes right to the heart of what I am passionate about. I grew up in journalism. My father was one of the first visibly Native journalists on TV in Canada. And he toured me around my first studio when I was in kindergarten. So, I was exposed to certain news events on TV as a kid as well. And I had some guidance from him, when I was a teenager. I was told that we would have our own network one day by my dad, and I didn't believe him. I was about 15, 16 going into high school, and he said, go study broadcasting. We're gonna have our own network one day. I think I probably rolled my eyes, and I just thought, he's dreaming. But I listened to him. I went to high school. I got my broadcasting, radio, television broadcasting diploma from high school. And I want to be able to attract kids at that level into journalism. And I think that the industry is at a point where there is a demand for Indigenous journalists, but there has not been the investments required to grow those seeds from the ground up, and to ensure that there are career paths for any Indigenous kid on any First Nation, any reservation, any place on Turtle Island. If they want to become a journalist, They should be able to have that dream in high school, know that they can be like me and get into it. I never went to college or university. I don't have a journalism degree. So I fought really hard to get the skills I needed in the space that I had. You know, I got in through an internship, and that internship was funded by a First Nations education organization. So they paid our salaries. There are ways to ensure that Indigenous kids can become journalists, directors, reporters, executive producers if they want to. And that's the heart of it for me. And I believe that this is the way to get it done through NAJA, the leading Indigenous journalist organization that has been here for nearly 40 years.
I guess, well, I mean, specifically, how are you sort of thinking that that might happen, Francine? And to you after that, Savannah.
Yeah, well, this year we've had just an amazing year. Our board, the work that we've been able to do, the partnerships that we've been able to make, the awareness that we have raised, and changes. We've had changes due to our statement making and people cheering us on. So what I do want to share publicly, which I haven't before, is that this year, the board of directors unanimously voted to support the spirit and intent of the Center for Indigenous Journalism. And so that is what I want to see grow. That is the seed that I have planted. And there is growing support on a grassroots level for this, and also at an elders council level, because the spirit and intent behind the Center for Indigenous Journalism is to be able to support our people as they're going through the difficult work of telling stories for our people and holding politicians to account for our people. So that's a lot of weight that our journalism community is carrying. And I brought that to my father, who I view as my journalism elder, and he helped me come up with the draft proposal for the Center for Indigenous Journalism. So that's what I'm putting on the table.
And Savannah, to you also, in terms of bringing folks in, specifically, how are you thinking of doing that?
Sure. Well, I was just talking about this. I teach a class this semester at the Institute for American Indian Arts, a journalism course where I've got two students who've already taken one journalism class and are now learning some radio and broadcast skills. And they were asking me about how I got my start, and we're talking about internships, and similar to Francine's story, the way that I was able to complete my first internship, which was unpaid, was through a grant from like the Native students group at my college, and because it was in my hometown, so I could live at home. But we were just talking about the challenges of that part of getting your start, how the industry kind of expects you to do all of these kinds of like internships and part-time jobs in different cities and things like that, and how that can be really difficult if you're if you don't have a lot of resources, if you're not like a very specific type of person. So anyway, I think that that's one important issue to tackle is, you know, if NAJA is not able to provide those kinds of resources, then finding ways to connect Native students with, you know, grants and scholarships that can help you get through that early part of your career where you might be expected to do this sort of underpaid work in random places. I think also, I mean, I really admire the partnerships that NAJA has built in the last few years with like Next Generation Radio, which is the program that sort of gave me my start early on. I think there's a third project with Next Gen coming in the spring, so that's I mean, a great initiative that, I mean, I think NAJA should continue to foster, and the connection with NYU. Yeah, I think those are some good some good steps. And I think one other important part of this also, I think, is working with editors and with newsrooms to make sure that when they have Native reporters coming into work for them, or that they're starting up Indigenous affairs beats, that they actually have the ability to support those reporters in those beats. I think we've seen a couple of sort of fledgling Indigenous affairs beats in the last few years sort of struggle or have a lot of turnover in those beats. And I think a big part of that is reporters are going into these newsrooms that want Indigenous affairs coverage, that are very hungry for it, but that don't actually have the knowledge or the structures to support those beats. You know, your editor doesn't know how to answer your questions, or doesn't understand the things that you're working on, or doesn't, you know, the editor is not trusting the Indigenous reporter that they've brought in to know and understand their beat. So I think that those are some areas to work on also, is working with editors and newsrooms.
Francine, I guess when you're thinking of, you know, NAJA 5, maybe 10 years from here, I mean, what are you seeing?
I see us making more of these partnerships. I see us getting more investments. And I think the investments need to come from the universities and colleges. They also need to come from the corporations, the media corporations. They need to be investing in the education. They need to be planting the seeds with us, not just expecting you know, us to grow the trees and then hand them over unprotected. And I totally hear what Savannah's saying. And I'm so glad to have Savannah with us and on board for this mission here, because everything she's saying, I can resonate with it too. You know, I got to start at the world's first national television network. I started at APTN. It was an Indigenous network created for and by Indigenous people and to educate Canadians. And, you know, it was a really safe space to be able to grow in, to be able to try things out. You know, I remember volunteering for a shoot and I had never even shot anything before. And I said, you know, hey, I could do it. I want to go. And they were like, all right, yeah, you can go. And then I just went to my crew and I was like, oh my gosh, guys, you got to show me how to use the camera because I'm going on a shoot. That would never happen, you know, anywhere else. But they were giving me opportunities. They were also pairing me with industry professionals. They were invested in my development and wanted to see me advance. And, you know, so I was really blessed to be able to be there for the first 21 years of my career. I am now at CBC Indigenous. CBC is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It is a mainstream network, and this is an Indigenous affairs unit within that. And there are examples, there are good examples of it working, and I would like to share those across the NAJA network.
Savannah, same question to you, NAJA 5, maybe 10 years down the line.
I agree, more partnerships. The one that I forgot to mention in my answer to the last question was the partnership with NBC, and offering a fellowship at NBC, I think, is a great example of a path in for somebody. Yeah, I think I would love to see more partnerships like that with outlets, and of course, not just internships and fellowships, but maybe some actual staff positions as well. Partnerships with colleges and universities. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess then in terms of specifics, kind of retreading some territory here, but I guess Savannah, what are some of the areas that you hope to specifically sort of contribute to the organization that I guess are unique to you and your vision of Native journalism?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked already a lot about making things easier for people who are just getting their start, and I think that's my biggest focus, and that, as I said, is why I decided to run. But I think that I bring a unique perspective as somebody who is pretty fairly new to the industry. I think most of the board at this point are folks who are kind of veteran journalists, and so that's what I think I bring, is a familiarity with the challenges.
Francine?
I bring my voice first and foremost. I bring my leadership. I'm the oldest sibling of 5 kids, so I've always had a bit of that leadership in me. But you know, I was once called the youngest Aboriginal television director in Canada. And that's because I was directing all of APTN's live TV shows at the age of 21. So I bring strength, I bring teachings. I also want to share the teachings that have been passed down to me. And I think that we need to bring more of that into supporting each other, supporting Indigenous journalists. And that is part of the foundation that will build the Center for Indigenous Journalism. I want to bring the teachings that I was taught and the guidance that I've been given from my father, who I say is a journalism elder. But I also want to be able to learn other teachings that can help and support our journalists who are in all corners of the country, because I am seeing journalists from all corners who've needed support, who've wanted to talk things through. And I think that we should be there for each other. It was really nice to have that type of environment at APTN, and I totally have that within my Indigenous unit. And it's really special to see how many Indigenous staff are spread throughout CBC. They're not just within the Indigenous unit. And so, you know, I really believe, and that's what I'm also going to bring. I'm going to bring that outlook that there can be change, because I have seen over the past 22 years, you know, I remember one of my first assignments. I was 19 years old, and I was sent to a protest. First Nations people were protesting at Indian Affairs, and every other journalist there from all the mainstream networks kept asking accountability questions, financial accountability questions about the relationship between governments. And there was no questions being asked for the people who were there present. And at the age of 19, I took my shaking microphone to the Indian Affairs representative, and I said, "What are you going to say about the chief withholding their social assistance checks, and it's 2 weeks before Christmas?" All of those people cheered. And that's what I want to see us be able to bring for our people. So there needs to be more young Indigenous journalists out there, 19-year-olds with shaky microphones, trying to blurt out a question to a politician. You know, I've been there and done a lot of things. And if I haven't been there and done those things, I'll find one of my colleagues who has been, and we can, you know, bring the advice. I can't wait till the next conference, to be honest. I look forward to the programs that we're going to be able to offer. I look forward to the people that we're going to be able to bring there to speak, and some of the teachings that we can share. so that's really what's on my mind as to what I can bring. And I really can't wait to be able to to bring it again for the next 3 years.
I guess maybe one last question, obviously, so we can kind of keep it short for folks who may be watching at home, and retreading again some territory here, but I think it's important. I guess, Savannah, can you talk a little bit about your vision for Indigenous journalism, I guess, generally in the future, and NAJA's place in that future?
Man, I think I would really love to see, I just started on a beat, my first reporting job that's not an Indigenous affairs reporting job. I just started as a business reporter at Marketplace. And I think I would like to see a lot more of that, like Native journalists working on every single beat at different outlets. Like our perspectives are valuable, covering everything, not just Indigenous affairs beats. So I think that I would like to see more of that. I really like the conversations that I've seen about NAJA becoming a little bit more global and including Indigenous journalists, not just in the United States and Canada. I'd really like to see us kind of harness the knowledge and the power of Indigenous journalists in other parts of the world as well, because I think that there are a lot of parallels between the challenges that we face and the what we're reporting on. I think there's a lot to be learned from each other. Yeah, those are my those are my big things.
Cool. Francie, same to you.
I want to see a journalist in my First Nation. And I say that because we just saw a story last week, a financial accountability story out of my First Nation, and the community is in a deficit, and the child welfare money account is also in arrears. And that was reported by CBC. So I believe that our communities need journalists on the ground. So I really, my big hope and dream for the industry, maybe 20 years from now, maybe 22, is that there are Indigenous journalists in their own communities being able to hold their own leadership accountable. And I know this happens in many outlets across the United States, but it has not been a mirrored effect here. There aren't many tribal media outlets. The community that I'm from, Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation, I actually went to school there in grade 8, and we did a little project. It was called Sandy Bay News. And I just recently remembered this, so look at how that influenced me today. But there's a radio station on the First Nation as well. But that's got to happen in all of these communities. There are hundreds of First Nations across Canada with stories of resilience, stories of wanting to keep leadership accountable. And I have to say, there aren't really media outlets out there holding First Nations leadership accountable. And there should be more interest in what goes on in our communities. And it needs to be reported on a higher level, more accurately, and more often, because things need to change in our communities. There are some in this country that are living in third world conditions. And journalism, as I understand it, is meant to change lives for people. And so that's really my big dream, is to see us be able to plant seeds, grow journalists, and have them change the lives for future generations. I know it's very aspirational, but I have seen a lot in the last 20 years. A lot has changed on the landscape. APTN had a huge influence in doing that. And to see Canada's mainstream broadcaster, CBC, with its Indigenous unit, when I saw that unit start, I thought, wow, that's what a huge thing. And now I get to be a part of it. And, you know, one thing that I wanted to say that was really important for me to say here is I also bring the perspective of sovereignty, and I've seen some Indigenous journalists wanting to explore sovereignty in journalism and story sovereignty. Well, I think that's a broader conversation that we should have. Let's do it at the next conference. And I want to also say that I do exercise my sovereignty as an Anishinaabe Kwe. My nation straddles the Great Lakes, and you know, that's another reason why this organization is so important to me, is because all of the great things that have been going on here, the way NAJA has been representing Indigenous journalists across the US, we need that representation more in Canada, and these programs also duplicated in here in this country. And, you know, it's Turtle Island, so that's the approach that I'm taking toward it, using my sovereignty to help this organization grow, and using myself as an example.
I'm not seeing any questions from viewers at the moment, but perhaps we can take the moment here. Any final comments from y'all? Francine, do you want to start off with final thoughts, final comments?
You know what? It's a great board. It's a great group to be part of, to be able to meet everyone, to be able to share all of the expert opinions, to be able to be there for each other when certain events have happened. You know, it's just been really great to be a part of that. And I've learned so much, and I want others to be able to learn as much as I have, which is really why I feel so strongly that we should be able to grow. I know we can grow. There are lifetime members who reside in Canada, and some of the founding members of this organization are also on the Canadian side, so to speak. So, you know, that's my final thoughts, that it's always wonderful to work with each other, be there for each other, and learn from each other. At the same time, we also want to see our family grow, the NAJA family, and I think that's something that we may also be able to do with our expansion, is expand how many people we have on the board, how many great minds that we have contributing to, you know, not only the ideas that go behind the programs. There's a lot of thought that goes behind the developing of a program, a lot of time. And so, you know, for me to be able to see people putting their time, their effort, and their care into it, it's just a real honor to be able to do the work.
Savannah, final closing thoughts here?
Just that NAJA has been a really incredible resource for me in my career, and the community has been really incredible. I've, you know, some of the professional mentors who've been the most helpful for me in getting my start are folks that I've met through NAJA, and it would be a real honor to join the board and to learn from the current members.
Again, to everybody out there, the online election is from the 27th to October 8th. We'll be determining incoming board members, as well as considering the adoption of an updated membership policy. So please do keep an eye out for those voting links to come in, so you can cast your vote. So, Savannah, Francine, anything else maybe that I should be asking you that I'm not here?
It's a very good reporter question. But no, I don't have anything to add.
It's been a long week, and honestly, I'm all talked out. I put it all in there with my team on CBC Indigenous this week. But you know, I really just I hope everyone is able to hear us out from start to finish, because a lot of things that Savannah was able to put out there are things that I echo.
Great. Well, again, thanks to everybody who tuned in and who's watching this recording. We appreciate your time and attention to these matters. Savannah, Francine, if you all could just stay on here after we close the recording and shut everything down.
Hello, thank you, everyone.